Welcome to the Lifeline, a production of Simply BJE. The goal of this podcast is to build, inspire, and to empower our listeners through conversations on business, leadership, and mental health. We invite you to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and at www.simplybje.com/the Lifeline. Now, let's tune in for today's episode. So today we as you know, this is Black History Month, and so we're going to hop into a topic that I think is definitely appropriate, but I think it's kind of touchy. We're going to talk about Black history and how there's a need for awareness, but there's also a need for accountability. But before we really dive into that part of the conversation, now there are a group of people, even in the Black community, that say that, in particular the Black community, I should say, that Black history is no longer relevant. We should celebrate Black history every day. So tell me, gentlemen, what do you think about that? I'll start with you, Quentin. Tell me your thoughts.
Man, I think as I've heard about that as well, I think I heard Morgan Freeman really diving in and saying, he don't understand why are we even doing it or what is the relevance of it. And now my own personal thought is I don't think it's more of us actually um, talking about Black History Month or even having a month that actually celebrates Black history, right? I think it is kind of needed because of the significance that our people have, contributed to this, to society, to this economy, to the way that basically the world is actually, functioning as a whole. I think we've shown many times of the inventions that we've created over the years that were never even shown or that definitely uh, were basically mishandled by at that time, the oppressors. So I think that where it is 2025 and so you kind of you want to talk about Black History Month, but I just think that in it we need to make sure that we're not mishandling Black History Month or trying to weaponize it to gain some ground, but use it for what it was really meant to, which was for education and then also for celebration. So
Hmm. That is a very articulate point, Mr. Crumbey.
It was all right. It was all right. It was all right.
So, Morgan Freeman, that's an interesting perspective based upon when he was born and what he has lived to see. So, I guess his perspective is I helped change the history, so let me just live my life. But on the flip side, I sent you guys a reel last night. It was kind of late. I don't know if you got a chance to watch it, but it was a Caucasian man, probably in the 50s, who was explaining the reason why he was a racist and the reason why he treated Black people the way he did. It was because his grandfather was taught, and he said his father was taught, then he said he was taught, and he said, hey, I'm teaching my kids. So his kids would probably be um, 60, 65 now. So if a person taught their kids the perspective of what a Black person is to them, then I think it's very relevant that we uh, teach our children what we mean to this world. Now, I had to think about Black history because I went all the way back to third grade when we were had to do a Black history project, and you got up there and you presented, and
right.
everybody kind of chose the same people. But then as you got older, you realized that we had a more significant impact on almost everything we use daily,
Yeah.
and how things from and this is a bad example, but it's a major example. Jack Daniel's whiskey, and how that whole formula was stolen and presented from a white by a white person, and it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And I think that it's very relevant that we continue to teach or rehearse it. Now, the point is, should it be done daily? Should we do it every day? That is true. But if you don't know as the parent or as the source, how are you going to teach the next generation? And I think that's why the Black History Month is a month in which we just take the light, we shine on it, we remind America or the world of our significance. So I think it does have its place. I don't see the need to totally erase it as some people want to, because it's not being taught daily, especially when
Right.
certain people are trying to remove it from the actual history, and they change the wording of we were workers. No, we were slaves.
Right.
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 So when you do that, and me personally, I've been employed, charged, and motivated by my brother Bo to make a bigger impact on the world. But I start with my home, and I know I make sure I share things with my sons because I'm raising black, and they're in a world where they grew up more integrated than I did in their daily life, meaning neighborhood, meaning school, every aspect. They see the world. You know, I grew up in the east side of Detroit, so 90% of the time, home, neighborhood, and church was all black.
Yep.
Except when I went to school, to a predominantly white school, then it was like, oh man, these white people, how do I respond? So I think it's very important that we teach our children daily, but we definitely need a month.
Bo, we can't
As
hear
you
you.
guys were talking,
Yeah, we good. You good now. You good now.
am I good now?
Yeah.
Testing,
Yeah.
testing. All right. Yeah, I kind of tend to lean to kind of underscore what Quentin was talking about as far as whenever I think about doing something, it's always about purpose. You know, what is the purpose of it and what are we doing with it? And I think it's extremely important that we do raise awareness, um, not just for the stories in and of themselves, but how do we educate and inspire this generation about the excellence that came with Black history? And I think that is the travesty, I believe, in what we're seeing today is that we've lost touch with the excellence
Yeah.
of that we have from our forefathers and our ancestors. We have not moved that forward like we need to be. So I think we need to, maybe shift not just for the stories themselves and not to weaponize it, not to um, talk about it from a place of bitterness, but to inspire, to say, man, this is what's possible. Because when you look at what the figures that we talk about in Black history, what they were able to accomplish in many times insurmountable odds, and we don't have those same challenges today, I believe that should be a source of inspiration, not just education, but inspire. Look, this is what is possible.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to get too far ahead in our conversation, but I believe it's important that we have these conversations. And I would agree with those people. It should be a daily process. It should be a daily endeavor to talk about the excellence of who we are as Black people, right? It shouldn't just be a highlight for a month. It should be a daily thing. But I believe that the having a Black History Month, there's no problem with it as long as it's really being used. Because, like
Right.
Lensberg was mentioning, how many people are really having these conversations in the home about what's possible? And I believe that's where it really starts at. And so that should be a daily talk. But as far as having a history month to bring attention to, I think it's very important because much of the stories have been lost over the years. And so that's just my take on it.
So I think it is important that we rehearse it, or we put it in front of the people, mainly the next generation. When you think about educators, and we touched about on this last night in our conversation, when you think
Hmm.
about educators inside the school system, sometimes that is the only place children are being taught or learning is going on. So
Yeah.
if that institution doesn't display that or rehearse that or share them the history, then sometimes it might be lost. Like you said, we don't think it's happening daily in certain homes. So, Q, why is it important to rehearse our history, or do you think these stories are even relevant?
Uh, excuse me. You know what? I'm gonna kind of go back with what Bo kind of was touching on, which is what is the relevance? I think over the years, we have taken the slavery part and we've just used that as that's all that we are.
Hmm.
Like were slaves. And to me, I think um, we've come so far. When you look at 2025, I think, Lynn, you said that, right? Your kids have been integrated in a way that I didn't even have that when I was growing up. It was black on black on black. It was like
Right, right.
everything was black on black. And but my kids went to school in a more um, a diverse setting. And so I just see what the impact has done just on their life being able to have that. But I think we literally have just lost the significance of black excellence. Um, that is really what we need to look at, right? Right now, you'll watch a lot of people say we're struggling, right? It's like, oh, I can't, we don't have enough money to do this, or the systemic situation and all that stuff. And I think what Black history shows us is who cares? There's work to be done, and if we join together, we can get this work done. That's when I look at Black history and I teach my kids. I rarely talk about the slavery part because, okay, that happened, and I'm not trying to, downplay it. But do you see how awesome it was, man, to watch Black people grow in such an adverse situation? Like, we were still getting married, we were still having kids, we were still creating. Black Wall Street was created in the worst. It was the worst era that was going on, man. And we created Black Wall Street and was such a threat that white people said, we got to burn this baby down. Like, they watching it. And that's what has been, I think, the problem of white America is, how does a people who we know that we are holding them back in every possible way that we can continue to strive and get out, and not just get out, but actually become excellent once we are out? So when you're talking about rehearsing it, I think that the stories are very relevant, but I think it's just how we use them. I teach my kids about the excellence that we bring to the table. My son's going to be a doctor. Listen, man, it's 2% of Black males are doctors in this world.
Mhm.
Will there be adversity, son? Yeah, but let me just tell you how somebody like Ben Carson became the top rated surgeon. And he did that in a time when that the whole not slavery, but the whole mentality around Blacks are not worthy to be was in full effect. But he rose to the occasion, and he's still talked about to this day as one of the best who's ever done it. And I mean, there's a countless a number of other people that are men that are in the medical field or any field. But that is something I think that white America it has plagued them. And then to watch us rehearse it, if I'm looking at you and all you talk about is the slavery part, I think that you're still held. Like, I think you're still in handcuffs. Like, I think that you as a people are still in handcuffs. And so that's why we get so much pushback on it about the slavery part, is because that's kind of all we bring to the forefront, is that somebody enslaved us, and not, it's just like how you look at the children of Israel. Most preachers preach about coming out of Egypt, the way that they complained, the way that they made an idol. Listen, do you see what they came out of and how they persevered through all of what they did? Do we talk about Moses pushing through people who were looking at him like he didn't know what in the world he was doing? Like, there's a lot of greatness to look at there, but even Moses failed the attempt, right? Because once the people complained so much, then what did he do? He struck the rock. He never made it. He himself got caught up in that slavery mentality that the people pulled him down, and he didn't make it. Like, none of his generation made it, because they kept themselves embodied and trapped inside of the slavery part of Egypt. And I think if we as Black people, if we can get out of that mentality and then use that rehearsing that we're doing to to highlight how excellent we can be, I think that then Black History Month becomes a tool, right? It becomes something that I think that families would actually, as a white person, am I telling my kids about the slavery part of this? Because you know what that does? That impedes us. Critical thinking, right? They don't want that, because that's something that actually puts heat on them. So they want to get that out of there. But if we literally just say, well, we're going to talk about our excellence, 90% of the time we're going to talk about the excellence because we have to address systemic racism and all of that stuff. But we're going to talk about our excellence on how we're able to break through barriers at every turn, and come out and really put ourselves in a better position. So I
Okay,
think
so
rehearsing.
let's say I'm excellent, right? I'm excellent. I'm in a corporate America. I'm excellent, and I am. Praise God. And I'm excellent, but I'm still fighting these um, these issues that stem from not necessarily the racist or racism. I'm not racist. I mean slavery, but the slavery turned into racism, and the racism turned into how they perceive us now. So
May
I
I
think,
interject?
yeah, please.
Okay, so I think it's difficult to talk about Black excellence without talking about slavery because slavery becomes the launching pad of how far we've come. That's my perspective.
That's
So
a
I
start.
think you can't really say, we don't we talk about it a little bit, but no, I think we need to talk about it so that we can talk about our journey and how we've overcome. But then on the flip side of it, as it relates to slavery, I think it makes Caucasians uncomfortable because the truth hurts. And I think the other thing as it relates to slavery, one of my issues with that has been is that we give deference to the Holocaust. There's a lot of conversation about the Holocaust, and there should be conversation because there's over 1.5 million Jews, I believe, that died during
Something like
that
that. Yeah.
period.
Yep.
And so I'm not saying, and I'm not talking about anti-Semitism, for anybody that's listening. That's not what we're talking about. What I'm saying is that if you can talk about a period that lasted for a decade, maybe two, and give such attention to that, but yet you try to minimize a 400-year period, that's problematic. And I think part of the issue, now I believe that there are some people that preach, what should I say, articulate or talk about the victimization of slavery, and it was victimization, but you can't stay there. But there has to be a balance. If we can give deference to the Holocaust, which is necessary, we need to be able to do the same thing. And I'm saying, when I say we, I'm talking about the culture, because again, there's a lot of time, there is this thing that people say, well, you should be over it now. Well, I can't say that. You can't say we should be over. You can't tell me how much I should be over something that impacted us generationally. Now, again, there are those of us who are thriving, but we can't deny the impact on our culture. So, again, I think it's a worthy discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I would agree with that. I don't think you can talk about Black excellence without touching on the fact of where we came from. I think the challenge is that many people tend to live there. And as Quentin was saying, as he was speaking, it made me think about someone standing in the jail cell with the door unlocked.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you know, when we decide to live in a place of limitation, right, in our mindset and how we operate, there is literally nothing that's holding us back at this point. Are there challenges? Absolutely. I mean, you'd be a fool not to notice that there are challenges. But do they hold us back in the same way that they used to?
No.
I think you'd be a fool to say that they do, right? I
Right.
mean, it's just too much evidence to say, dude, you can do anything that you want to do despite the challenges. And those who are closest to slavery and oppression, how they thrive in spite of, to have all this opportunity that we have today and to still be talking about the struggle. And I think that's
Right.
the challenge that
It
we
is. Yeah.
enjoy talking about the struggle, and it's not the same anymore. There are absolutely too many examples of people who have made it out. And so, when we speak about, even if we were to speak about the Holocaust and stuff like that, when you talk about that demographic of people and the excellence they presented in lieu of that, when you look at Jews, right, they are disproportionately smaller. I mean, probably one of the smallest demographics, but they're disproportionately more successful than any other demographic.
Right.
And
I
that's a
mean,
whole different topic, though.
that's a
Right.
whole different topic.
Yes,
So,
yes.
It is,
so,
but it
but
is,
it's relevant.
but I was gonna
No, it's
say,
not
but
relevant when you have funds to help you. when there's certain
Well,
funds that are set aside to help you. So we can't even talk about that one. That's something totally different.
well,
Well,
But
my
I'm
yeah,
point,
right.
but here's the deal. But here's the deal. When you talk about community and togetherness, that
Hmm.
is one of the biggest challenges that we have in our community.
But you
right.
So
can't speak
from
about
that,
that without talking about the slavery issue because that's where it was.
I
The mentality was
and so my
was
point is not to
born into it.
compare and contrast. It was
Right.
just to highlight the point that, in spite of that, and so that goes to a much larger point, as I was earlier, is that if we would use our energy to really start to target areas that can truly make a difference.
Right.
When you talk about other demographics, how they begin to lobby to get laws changed, and we see, other demographics, the LGBTQ or whatever, how they can lobby together to get laws changed.
Yeah.
So, to me, my point is at what point do we begin to take more accountability about the change that we want to see,
Right. And
right?
that's what I was going to speak to where Lynn was headed with
Yeah.
his, which is and correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn. He's like, so you're successful, you're trying to do what you're trying to do, but then these powers to be still want to try to hold you down. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Like you,
I mean, and I say that respectfully because, God is my source and he will always put me where I
yeah,
need to
yeah, yeah,
be.
yeah.
Right. But you do have these different forces um, that don't see you as an equal, that
Right.
don't see you in the perspective. And as we were talking last night, Bo made some significant points about helping each other and boosting
Mhm.
each other up and mentoring. And
Right.
the statement he made was some of his uh, biggest impacts were people of different races, right? Rather than somebody within your own race that helped and pushed you up.
Yeah.
And that's great. But sometimes when you're in a position, it could be some people say a glass ceiling, it could be a white ceiling as well.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's what I was saying about sometimes
Sure.
excellence in people, that foundation might not be strictly from slavery, but it might just be the way that a person is viewed based
Right.
upon how they were taught.
Right.
I know Bo used a great analogy about standing in front of or standing in a jail cell with the door open. And once you walk out, you have the success. But once you get to where you're going, you can always tell. When I started, I was in jail once, but
Mhm.
Right.
I took the initiative to do such and such and such. That didn't keep me there, and now I'm here. So it always has to be a part of the springboard, like Barry said. It's where we start.
Yeah. So my thing is that I'm gonna go with like Barry said, right? I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that we have not really capitalized on as blacks is the power that we have when we come together. So when you
Yes,
look at like the civil rights movement and all of that, that's really what it was trying to just show you that, Martin Luther King was just trying to show you that, man, when we do stuff together,
together. Yeah,
we
Right.
so they were using violence and all of that stuff, and he was like, it's so much more than just that violence piece. Is that
Right.
really, if we're just together, it irritates people even more.
yeah,
So
Correct.
see, and so what the whole point of what they're trying to do as a whole is always trying to keep us in this divisive or this division type of situation, right?
mhm,
And so I think that if you are black excellence and you figured out how to get out of there, and this goes to Barry's point, which is then there's someone outside of your race has helped you actually get somewhere to get to these next levels, right? But if you go back to slavery time, that's kind of always been the case, right? There's always been someone. Harriet Tubman didn't free all those people with black help. That's not who help her free all those people. It was white help. It was white people who put their lives on the line to cover her, hide her in carriages, hide her, and continue to keep this high, because we didn't have anything to get out. We needed the other race to see that we were in a bad shape, that we were actually being discriminated against, to pierce on their heart, which was nothing but God. God had to say, I got to soften some hearts up here, because basically my people will never get out of this if I don't soften up some hearts of other people on the other side of the fence. So when you look at us now today, and as we're moving, I find myself in that same situation sometimes, is that I find other races that are so much willing more to help me get to the next level, than I am with my own people. And I think that that's where we lack that, because we're still, this kind of goes back to how we've been, stamped during slavery time, which is we have a direct competition with each other. We
Right.
want to see each other win until the other person is winning, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I want to see Lynn do great. And then Lynn comes over and say, Q, man, I just hit the big one. Let me take you to the new crib, right? And then you get over there and you like, what? Like I helped this dude and look where he's at now. Like he didn't surpass me. And we're not looking at the win. We're just looking at you are beating me now. And it has nothing about you beating me. I think that each one of us are ahead of each other in some area of our life.
Sure.
I have 27 years of marriage. I'm ahead of somebody.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Like, and you got to be, I'm ahead of Lynn. Lynn's older than me, but I got more years of experience in marriage than he does.
Right.
So if Lynn can't use me as a tool and say, man, me and the wife are having some issues, blah, blah, blah. And then I say, hey, man, this is what I did, boo, boo, boo. But we don't have that capacity to go to people and say, hey, I got issues. I need the help. I need this. I need this, because in our minds, we don't want to look weak to one another. Like it's like a vicious cycle. That's why I said that you want to talk about slavery, man. But the thing that happened to us during the slavery time really messed up the way that we think today. And so,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
so when we're talking about it and rehearsing it, what are the
Right.
solutions though? Right. So it's like,
Right.
That's correct.
man, I don't mind talking about it, but it's like, but when do we get to a point to where somebody actually grabs the door to that jail cell and just pushes it open, walks out, turns around, shuts it, and then lock it? Like, I'm not going back in there. Now I could talk about it, but I'm not going back in there. And I feel
Right.
like sometimes we we go all the way back to Alabama, Louisiana,
Right.
Virginia, and like
Yeah.
literally we're all standing there talking about it, but we're there.
But
And I'm
you
like,
need to go back there. You need to go back there. You need to see it. You need to feel it, smell it,
but
so you can
right,
I
have
but
don't.
that motivation.
yeah, but when you do that, but the thing is
Yeah.
this, is that it's just that everyone is not capable
Yeah.
of going back, looking at it, and then taking it as a tool to project or to actually put something in motion that can bring some excellence to your life.
Right.
90% of us, or I don't want to say 90,
That's a big
about
number.
I know 60%. And I'm estimating, right? But it's just, but the language you hear out there is shows that
Yeah.
it's a heavy number of people who live in the jail cell with the door wide open. It ain't
Right.
even just cracked, but the door is wide open. And these are millionaires. Like when I hear a
Mm-hmm.
multi-millionaire get on TV and go, the struggle that everybody, we're all in this. I'm like, well, where did you get that from? Like, you're a
But they might,
multi-millionaire, and the
yeah.
thing,
But see, I hate to cut you, but they might be part of the issue to keep it going. Because they want, like you
Correct.
made a great point. You made a great point about in the civil rights movements and in the '60s and how we were more together because we had a common purpose. And then after that, it seemed like we just got totally divided. And
yeah,
now with social media and wants and things, I want this. I'm holding a stack of money. He got this car. He didn't rented a Bentley to take a picture. It's all this
right,
other competition. So
right.
when that happens, then who is going back to help each other? I think when we came out of the civil rights, and I don't know, I'm kind of assuming because I'm such a young man, but when we came out of the civil
Oh
rights
boy,
movement,
hogwash.
I believe there was a push to kind of stick together or let me help this person. I say that because when my uncle got a job, I heard he brought my father, and everybody was getting jobs at the General Motors. They was helping each other to try to get on to get a better life. But now it's like, man, can you put me on? Nah, man, I ain't putting you on. I had to work and get mine. I ain't watch it. I put you on, rather than
Right.
taking the opportunity to mentor and push each other. And when I say go back to Alabama, I said that because there in Montgomery, Alabama, it is a museum that displays
Yeah.
all the names of the people who were
Yep.
lynched.
Yep.
And when you walk in that place, you feel it, and you
No
see
facts.
you see this. And when I walked out of there, I had a different motivation. It wasn't a motivation to pick up a gun and kill. It was a motivation to be excellent,
Yeah.
to make a difference, as Bo said. In some way, if I'm a business owner, if I have something, I can hire someone, I can push someone, I can
Yeah.
try to make these changes. Um, but I think it's definitely a change from us helping us rather
Yeah.
than us competing against us.
Yeah. And if we can
And
get
I
rid
think
of
that's
that.
the
Oh, I'm sorry, Bo.
I was going to say, and I think that's really what what I was speaking to earlier. It's the sense of community,
Yeah.
right? And togetherness, because even going back to Alabama or wherever the case may be, it's all about how that conversation is framed.
Yeah. I agree.
If I go back and say and look at all the names of people that were lynched and say, look what they did to us, that's going to engender a different level of response as opposed to look where we came from. Look at everything that happened to us and look how we
I
were
agree.
still able to overcome.
Yeah.
That's a whole that's going to, bring up a whole different motivation or emotion. You may see that, but it's more towards progress, right? Not
Yeah. I agree.
stagnation. You
Yeah.
with me?
I
And it's
agree.
all
Yeah.
about how conversations are framed. And so, we were having this conversation last night. Everybody was up in arms about Kendrick Lamar's performance, and they were talking about this is like Harriet Tubman and stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm free, but I'm free. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
yeah, there's challenges, but I'm free. And my question would be, how many of you guys, you know, like I asked last night, went and supported the small guy who's trying to get his business going? Or does he have to become notable and popular before you decide to support him? Right?
Yes.
When you have that friend who just started their business and they share on Facebook and ask for your support, what's your response?
Yep.
Or do they have to become popular enough or notable enough to support? And so when they talk about Black excellence and togetherness, this is the point. You know, it's we have these sayings that we black crabs in a bucket. We know these things within our community, and we talk about them freely, right? And we have some level of awareness of it, but the accountability is the challenge. Are we going to truly be accountable to the division that we continue to perpetuate in our community? Right? So
Yeah.
it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, we had challenges. We've had challenges, but those challenges today are not the same,
Yeah.
you know? But so my thing is, back in what you were talking about, Lynchburg, and we've alluded to on so many cases back then, how we were together in the civil rights, but the people that we upheld as role models were different than today.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Doctors,
true.
pastors, we had a standard that we all ascribed to back then.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
I
I
don't think we
agree.
have. I think we've lost touch with those standards these days, and who we celebrate. We celebrate, you know,
Foolishness.
musicians
Yeah.
who foolishness,
Yeah.
musicians who degrade. People talk about killing each other. I mean,
Hmm.
we are the only demographic that I can see that celebrates entertainment that we'll call it entertainment
Yeah.
that is degrading, immoral, and we're playing it in the car with our kids. We're bumping our heads to it, and we call these our leaders and people to look up to.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Those are the
You know what I
ones
mean?
that's excellent. That's what we consider excellent. And I
Yeah.
think it's just a part of history because that was the only option in our back in the day. You think about Wynton Marsalis and all these jazz artists who came from Duke Ellington and all these other artists who had the opportunity to be put in front of people. They were entertainers.
But
Sports, they were entertainers. These are the people in which are picked for us to be our leaders because they
but
get the media aspect and the media platform.
Right.
but
But then they also get the line. And the thing I laugh about the whole entertainment thing is that they gave it to us because it makes them money. Like
Come
they
on
didn't
Hmm.
now.
get,
Yeah.
they
Come
didn't,
on,
they didn't,
see, there you know where I'm going.
you know what I'm saying? Like, so they
Yeah.
didn't give it to us because they wanted to see us be anything. It was
No, not
like,
at all. It's
it
all
was
about the
more
money.
like, hey, this guy can do his thing. And if we pay him $100, right, I'm gonna make $100,000.
Thousand, right?
Yeah.
So and it's true because when you look at the stories that are being written, that are the movies that are being or the documentaries on
Hmm.
like New Edition, LL Cool J, and like all
Hmm.
those entertainers that were back in those days. When you
Hmm.
listen to those guys talk about what went on back then, they'd be like, our contracts was messed up. They were giving them 10-year contracts, 20-year contracts, paying them nothing. And these dudes are 40 years old and you're just not getting out of a bad contract. So New Edition is really just now making money off of the songs that they produced in 83.
Wow.
How is that? That is a truly a problem. But once again, because we are always hungry for getting out of something and making this money to live, or we need it, that we've always been able to be manipulated into bad situations just for a dollar. It's like, hey, we're gonna pay you, man, but you can only talk about this killing, murdering, this, and this. Uh,
And we
it's
did
like,
it.
man, listen, do I pass up on it? Listen, do I pass up on money
Yeah.
to change my entire family life just because they want me to degrade my own people? The answer is going to be no. You know why? Because that guy that they're talking to is from Compton, and he's in the gutter. And
Right.
when you go to the gutter, you can get those guys to do whatever you want for how much ever you want to pay. It's just
Right.
like for that whole cycle of the D1 status for basketball. You know who most of those guys are? Most of those guys are the dudes that in the beginning of this whole situation, D1 for football or basketball. When you hear those guys talk, it's guys who come out of the gutter. It's like dudes that got, if they don't get in this, they got to change their whole family. Like, I mean, talking like the whole family. If I don't make it to the NFL or the NBA or the baseball, whatever, my whole family is at risk of never having anything. Well, they're able to manipulate you because they can take advantage of you because all you can think about is trying to change your family. And if you have $0 and I give you $100,000, that's like $1 million. So that's where we have to understand our self-worth. Like, I think that the whole thing, when we live in that slavery piece too long, it take away from our self-worth. It take away from our self-esteem. It takes away from your confidence. It take away, like I've been trying to tell my son with this doctor thing. People will come to him and be like, dude, being a doctor is a long time, man. I mean, how you gonna be able to do this? You ain't gonna make no money. And this is what this dude hears, right? Even my own friends who I talk to, man, your son, how you gonna be able to take care of yourself, man? Is he got what about? And I'm like, it's, it's not about right now. When do we ever understand about delayed gratification? You know that there's actually some happiness in delayed gratification. There's actually a high level of success in delayed gratification, right? Because now that's what we're in as grown men, is that, man, I got to work this business and I got to work it for 5 to 10 years before I see a profit. Well, it's just maturity that let you know that I got to do this. But the thing is that we got to preach that and teach that at our younger level, that delayed gratification actually helps and creates some level of success because you get to hold on to your character, your integrity, your morals, your value. You know why? Because it's a small step. Every turn you're taking, it takes a little time, but I get to evaluate who's trying to pour into me, who's offering me stuff. I get to evaluate that. Why are you offering me $1 million? Right? LeBron James got a lifetime deal with Nike. Why would you offer me that? Right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, basically, dude, you're not getting me for a lifetime. Why are you offering me that? Because that's not for my benefit. It'll take care of my family forever, but it's not for my benefit if you're offering me a lifetime deal. That just shows you how they think. It's like, hey, LeBron, after this, and I think it was Kobe who really showed them that, hey, after these dudes stop playing basketball, some of these dudes are great. Michael Jordan showed you he's greater now than he was when he was on the court.
Mm-hmm.
The dude makes more money today than he did ever playing basketball. So you know who thinks that this is a smart idea? White America. They go, hey, LeBron's better after he finished. He's making some money today, but man, we give him a lifetime because he's gonna make more money on the other end. You see what I'm saying? So, and then that's a mentality thing where LeBron should have probably said no.
Yeah.
You know, so when just being in that place, to me, sometimes I don't like that it handcuffs us, and it forces us to be a little bit out of character. We get a little shisty. We start taking on things that we shouldn't, and it messes up our ability to be excellent.
Sure.
So
I agree. And man, I can tell, man, we're going to come back and revisit this next week.
Hey, this is Barry's fault, man.
Yeah, this, but it's a great conversation. And I believe it's a conversation that we really need to talk about. And
It
I
is.
hope our listeners will share this episode. And for me, as we start to wrap this up, I think we need to start speaking a different truth. And I'm not talking about objective truth, but I'm talking about a subjective truth. We tend to talk about the truth of slavery. I think what we're all saying, there's a different truth that we could live by that will empower us these days. And sometime it's going to come up against opposition, even in our own community. But it makes me think about a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But it says, all truth goes through three stages. At first, it's ridiculed. Secondly, it's violently opposed. And thirdly, it's accepted as if it was always true. And for those of us who are on a different side of the conversation that says, hey, look, we see the challenges, but the truth of the matter is there's progress that we've made, there's progress that we can make, there's progress that we will make if we see it differently. If we continue to hold on to that truth, in spite of the ridicule, in spite of the opposition, pretty soon the impact that we can make will begin to perpetuate through our entire community. So, but before we wrap this up, this conversation, hey, Quentin, tell our listeners how they can connect with you, the email, social media, all your handles and stuff like that. I know you have some products to sell. Tell them about your website before we close the podcast.
Well, you can catch me or contact me or talk with me through all the social platforms, Instagram, Facebook. You can also check out the merchandise here, Love or Save Period, at www.saveperiod.com. And then also, I also have a podcast called the Menology Project Podcast, where we basically talk about mental health and wellness for men, just trying to empower men to thrive and to strive and to be excellent. And so you can really catch me on those type of platforms. The podcast is on all your streaming platforms as well.
Sweet. So this concludes another episode of The Lifeline. Just an amazing conversation. I know it's going to be even more exciting. Hopefully this gets our listeners talking. I'm sure it will. But this is another episode of The Lifeline with your hosts, BJE, Lynnsburg, Petway, and Bo Powell. Don't forget to check us out at www.simplybje.com/The Lifeline and on social media. Look, we're on a mission. We want to bring light and life into your household, so join us. And let us hear your feedback, because it's all about bringing life to you on The Lifeline. Y'all take care.
Thank you for listening to today's episode with host, business expert, and life coach Bo Powell, social media influencer and entrepreneur Lynnsburg Petway, and leadership coach and mental health advocate Barry J. Elliott. Join us next week for another impactful conversation on The Lifeline. God bless.